The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that rattled the glass on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Out here, a knock before dawn usually meant bad news. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug still warm in my hand, and froze. 2 police cruisers were parked in the gravel drive, lights off, but engines running. The air smelled of pine and diesel. And there, behind the officers, stood Patricia Thornfield, clipboard in hand, her mouth tight as a rusted gate hinge. Patricia, the self-declared queen of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. She wore her usual uniform, striped shirt tucked into dark jeans, heels stabbing the dirt like she owned it. I could see the faint reflection of the word HOA stenciled across her clipboard, like a badge she didn't earn but loved to flash. Mr. Walker, one of the officers said, stepping forward, "We've received multiple complaints and fine reports from the Willow Creek HOA about your property." I blinked, trying to process that. Complaints? Fines. Officer, this is Walker Ranch, 47 acres. My family's been here since 1978. We're not part of any HOA. Patricia cut in before he could answer. Oh, we'll see about that. You violated our land maintenance standards, water usage limits, and noise restrictions. We've documented everything. You can't just ignore the community's rules. Her voice carried that sharp, smug confidence of someone used to being obeyed. The officer looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. Ma'am, we're just here to ensure there's no disturbance. Mr. Walker, maybe you can come down to the HOA office and... I don't answer to her office, I said quietly, sipping my coffee. And I don't answer to the HOA. Patricia's face turned red. We'll see how long that attitude lasts. I've already filed your fines with the county clerk. If you don't comply, we'll escalate. That word, escalate, hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. I smiled slightly. I'd faced worse than paperwork and empty threats. Years in the Army Corps of Engineers had taught me how to deal with people who thought authority was louder than reason. Still, something about the way she smiled, like she already knew something I didn't, made the hair on my neck rise. When the police finally left, she lingered at the end of the driveway, scribbling on her clipboard, muttering to herself. And as I watched her car disappear down the dirt road, a thought hit me. Maybe Patricia didn't know who she was dealing with, but soon, she would. By the next morning, Patricia's threats had turned into letters. 3 thick envelopes sat in my mailbox, each stamped urgent in red. Inside, the HOA had stacked a neat tower of fines. $250 for unauthorized structures, $400 for unapproved livestock, and $900 for community disturbance. I laughed. Out here, the only disturbances came from coyotes and wind. Still, something about it felt deliberate, like Patricia wasn't just enforcing rules. She was testing boundaries. I drove down to the Willow Creek subdivision that afternoon. Their manicured lawns and matching mailboxes felt foreign, a world painted in perfect symmetry and silent tension. Every house looked afraid to stand out. The HOA office sat in the middle of it all, a white prefab building with a blue sign that read Willow Creek HOA. Community integrity matters. Inside, the air smelled of toner and stale coffee. Behind the counter, a nervous-looking clerk straightened his tie when I walked in. Can I help you, sir?" "Yeah," I said, sliding the letters across the desk. "I'm here to see whoever thinks they can fine me for owning land outside their jurisdiction." Before he could respond, her voice came from behind the door, sharp, certain, and unmistakable. "Let him in." Patricia stood by a window, clipboard in hand, the afternoon sun cutting through the blinds and striping her face like prison bars. "Well, Mr. Walker," she said with a smile too tight to be sincere. "You came. I like to face my problems directly," I replied, "even when they hide behind paperwork." She circled me slowly, heels clicking on the linoleum. "Your property may predate our development, but our community charter extends maintenance authority over all adjacent landowners. That includes you." "Authority?" I said. "You mean harassment?" Her expression hardened. "You're standing in violation of community standards. Your ranch lowers our property values." That last line said everything. It wasn't about grass height or noise. It was about pride and power. "I've reviewed your charter," I said quietly. "You don't have jurisdiction. My parcel's exempt. Filed before 1980. Your HOA came into existence in 2014. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. She hadn't expected me to know that. I stepped closer. Send all the cops you want, Patricia. Send every letter. But until you learn where your borders end, you're trespassing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was electric, one breath away from a storm. Then she smiled again, that same tight, dangerous grin. Oh, I wouldn't worry about borders, Mr. Walker. Paperwork can move faster than fences. And with that, she turned away, scribbling something new on her clipboard, something I wouldn't see until it was too late. By the end of the week, I received another letter, this one printed on glossy paper with the Willow Creek HOA logo embossed in gold. Notice of mandatory board review. The meeting was set for Friday evening at the community center. Attendance was required. I almost laughed when I read that. But then I saw the last line. Failure to appear will result in formal legal escalation. That got my attention. So I decided to go. Not as myself, though. I spent that Friday afternoon in my garage, going over old blueprints and aerial maps, my kind of battlefield. I studied the subdivision's boundaries, drainage lines, and original zoning files. And buried deep in the county records, I found what I needed. A copy of the original deed survey that excluded Walker Ranch by name. That night, I traded my jeans for a dark jacket and walked into the meeting quietly, blending in among the residents. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, and folding chairs squeaked as people murmured and shuffled papers. Patricia stood at the front, clipboard ready, chin high, the perfect picture of authority. She didn't notice me at first. Good evening, everyone, she began. We're here to address repeated violations by a landowner adjacent to Willow Creek who has refused compliance with our regulations. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes were sharp. She was hunting. A man near the front raised his hand. Isn't his property outside the HOA boundary? Patricia didn't even look at him. Technically, yes, but under Section 12B of our covenant, the board reserves the right to extend community standards to properties that directly affect neighborhood appearance. There it was again, power disguised as paperwork. I sat in the back, quietly taking notes. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't look convinced. When the time came for public comment, I stood up. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice calm. I have a question about this landowner you're referring to. Patricia squinted, trying to place my face. You're just a neighbor, I said. Curious one. She smirked. Go ahead. Did your charter's extension clause ever pass through county review? I asked. Because from what I can tell, no such amendment exists in the recorded documents. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. I walked forward, holding up a copy of the original deed map. This right here, Walker Ranch, predates your development by 34 years. County Registry 1978, document 1245-C. You're operating outside your jurisdiction. The room fell silent. Patricia's hand tightened around her clipboard. Her eyes flickered toward the other members. Some were whispering now. Who are you? She asked. I smiled. The man you've been trying to find. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone stifled a laugh. Her face hardened. You can't just walk in here and... I just did, I said. And now, everyone here knows what's going on. The air was thick with tension. Patricia's jaw worked as she searched for words, but the damage was done. The truth was out. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard her voice again, low, sharp, and cold. This isn't over, Mr. Walker. I looked back. It never is, Patricia. Not until someone stands up. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't let this go quietly. By Monday morning, I knew Patricia had declared war. It started small, a citation notice taped to my gate. Then came the drone, a buzzing little thing that hovered over my pasture, recording my horses, my barns, even the back of my house. I shot it down with a stream of water from the garden hose. It sputtered, sparked, and fell into the mud like a wounded insect. That afternoon, a county inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, same brand as Patricia's. Got an anonymous tip, he said, about unpermitted structures. Anonymous, I repeated, crossing my arms. Sure. He poked around the barn, took photos, and left. I called the county office later that evening. There were no complaints on record. The man had been bluffing. Patricia was testing how far she could push. But I wasn't the kind of man who played defense for long. I spent the next few days digging. Through county archives, online filings, and even a few backdoor calls to old colleagues from my Army Corps days. Patricia's name came up on half a dozen property disputes, every one ending with her getting fined or censured. Turns out, this wasn't her first crusade. Wednesday morning, I visited her old neighborhood, a place called Pine Hill Estates. When I mentioned her name, the local store clerk laughed. "Oh, her? Yeah, she tried to get us to paint our mailboxes beige. Half the town moved out just to get away from her." By the time I drove back home, my plan was already forming. That night, I sat on my porch, a stack of documents beside me. Every letter, every false fine, every recorded drone flight, cataloged and dated. Evidence. And at the bottom of the pile, the most important piece, a notarized copy of my land deed, complete with the exemption clause. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out toward the hills, where the faint glow of Willow Creek's porch lights flickered like distant campfires. She thought she could intimidate me. She thought rules and red ink could outmatch experience and strategy. But this wasn't her battlefield. It was mine. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. The clerk recognized me immediately. I'd called the day before. "Mr. Walker," she said, smiling. "You're filing that report, right?" I nodded and handed her the folder. Every false claim, every violation of privacy, every misuse of authority. Make sure it's all recorded. When I stepped out of that building, the sky was clear, the kind of blue that only comes after a storm. Patricia had built her empire on fear and ignorance. She just didn't realize she'd picked a fight with someone who knew how to dismantle systems, legally, quietly, and completely. And by the time she figured it out, it would already be too late.
The dawn broke with a strange calm that morning, too quiet for what was coming. Mist rolled low across the fields as I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring at the distant ridge where the old oak trees lined my property's edge. It was the same ridge Patricia had claimed belonged to the HOA last week. I smiled. She was about to learn just how wrong she'd been. By noon, I was driving toward the county courthouse. My truck's tires hummed against the asphalt, the sound steady and deliberate, like a drumbeat before a march. The envelope on the passenger seat contained everything. Land surveys from 1979, the original deed signed by the township registrar, and copies of Patricia's fake violation letters. Inside the courthouse, I met with Sheriff Douglas, the same man Patricia had sent to enforce her imaginary rules on my land. He was waiting in the hallway, hat in hand, looking more embarrassed than angry. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I owe you an apology." I nodded. "Not to me, to the land." He sighed, glancing at the paperwork. "We checked the records. You're right. Your ranch isn't part of any HOA. It never was." "That's what I've been saying all along," I replied. But she wouldn't listen. He leaned closer. "She's being investigated. Turns out she's been collecting fees from several properties she doesn't legally oversee." I felt a quiet satisfaction bloom in my chest. Then I suppose she'll have a lot to explain. 2 weeks later, the news spread across the county. The HOA president, Patricia Thornfield, had resigned amid allegations of fraud and intimidation. The same neighbors who once glared at me now waved when they drove by. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge, I walked out to the fence line where the old oak trees stood, silent witnesses to decades of stubborn history. I ran my hand over the rough bark, listening to the cicadas hum in the distance. For a moment, I thought about Patricia, the way her voice used to rise over every meeting, every confrontation, every letter. Power, when built on fear, never lasts long. I turned back toward the porch. My wife was waiting with 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling into the golden light. She smiled. "So it's over?" I nodded slowly. "For her, maybe. For me, it's just peace returning home." The wind picked up, rustling through the grass. The sign near the gate, the one Patricia once tried to tear down, swayed gently in the breeze. It still read, "Walker Ranch, EST 1979. Not HOA property, ****. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like the land was smiling back.